So yeah, so today I was thinking we could do functions. It's a topic that we haven't gone through, and schools don't always go through it. So you may have done it, which is great, but schools don't always tend to actually get through it. And it comes up most years. So normally just like a few mark questions. So again, we'll go through some basics, and then I do have actual exam questions from the last few years. I got them from all exam boards. So there's AQA, there's EdXL, and there's also OCR too, just in case some of you are doing the OCR ones, because again, all the specs are the same, so it doesn't actually matter. So, with functions, essentially you can think of f of x as just y. Okay, so the f of x just means that we have a function, so something that depends on x. So it's a variable of x. In general, what a function is it's something that accepts an input and gives you an output. So you have an input, and then a function does stuff to the input and gives you an output. So this will be relatively useful if you guys want to ever do something with like computing or anything like that. Same with kind of physics as well. So somewhat useful. Or decision maths. So some of you doing A-level maths, if you're doing the OCR exam board, you'll have something called decision maths where you use inputs and functions quite a lot. So essentially if you put in a number, let's say 3, the function will do something to that number, like it might times it by 2 and give you an output of 6. So if you remember the number machines you did back in primary school or back in year 7 and 8, it's basically that. Okay? So it takes in something, an input, which we just call x, and it gives you an output. Okay? Pretty simple, hopefully. So for example, with this first question, if you look, when you want to sub in a number, all you do is you change the x for that number. So all this means is we're substituting in 5 in place of x, and we just get 1. Is that okay? So depending on how much you've done functions in the past, that might be okay, or it might be a bit tricky. But is that all right so far? Good, yeah. Cool. It does get a bit more complicated, unfortunately, just like everything with maths. But again, for the next one, all you're doing is subbing in 3. Minus 4 equals minus 1. Nice and easy. Not too bad so far. You can get slightly more complicated with what the actual function is. So in this case, we have a quadratic. So slightly harder, I guess, technically. But 2 times 2 squared minus 10. So 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, so we have 8 minus 10, which equals minus 2. Fairly easy, right? And then if you have minus 2, you have pretty much the same thing. This actually used to be each input having one output. Yes. So there's no exception, sorry. So in all functions, okay, they need to have one input for one output. However, you can have multiple outputs for the same input, which is what we're going to discover right now. So if I do this, minus 2 squared is 4, times 2 is 8, minus 10. It's the same thing. So despite the fact that I have 2 different inputs, so different x values, I get the same y value. That's completely allowed, that's completely legal. However, you can never have one input giving you a different output. And let's think about why. Could you imagine if I put 2 into this equation, got minus 2, then put 2 in again and I got a different number? Like, maths would just be broken completely. So square rooting is an interesting thing. So in that case, it's a bit trickier because you're right, technically you'd have 2 values that come out of it. But what they mean by one input having one output is the sense that if I open up a calculator, right? Ignore that, was from a different lesson. And I do like 2 times 3. Every time I press equals, I should get 6. So when you talk about square rooting, you're right that there's 2 values in your answer. How can I put this? For GCSE, you should technically know that there's only one input for one output. But I see what you mean by what you're saying, right? Like, technically speaking, square root. So if for example, my function was the square root of x, then f of, let's say, 4, which is square root 4, is, you're right, plus or minus 2. So this is part of the spec that I really dislike because of this reason. You're 100% right. And if you think about it, when you draw the graph of square root x, you're going to get two different input values. And it gets kind of weird like that. So yeah, that is interesting. So yeah, you are correct. But for GCSE, basically this is illegal. Put it that way. Why is it plus or minus? That's a very good question. So when we do square root 4, what we're asking ourselves is there a number that times is by itself to get 4? And of course, the answer that you think of is 2, right? 2 times 2 is 4. However, minus 2 times minus 2 is also 4. So the other answer is actually plus or minus. Exactly, Evie. And funny enough, you know what you just said in terms of the different values? Is it's actually quite an advanced level of maths. So at university, you deal with the repercussions of that. So the consequences of the fact that we have plus or minuses. So if you want to do a university maths lecture, you would be correct. And this actually does cause issues. Because minus 2 times minus 2 gives 4. Yeah, well done, Ma. Perfect. But Evie, you're 100% correct. And it does cause issues in the real world. Yeah. You're right, Ma. Perfect. So for this last one, it says g of x equals 8. Okay? So we're not subbing in x is 8. We're actually saying that 8 equals 2x squared minus 10. Then you're just solving it like a normal equation. Plus 10 to both sides. We get 18 equals 2x squared. Divide both sides by 2. We get 9 equals x squared. So then x equals 3. Now, Evie, I know what you're going to say. Plus or minus 3. For functions questions, just put 3. You won't be marked down. But yeah, technically it should be plus minus 3. But we can leave it as 3 if we want. Okay? So yeah. Perfect. Is everyone okay with that? If we are, we can go on to slightly harder questions. So, Ma, Evie, Lila, other. Yeah. So basically, it's just really a new notation, right? It's just a new way of writing something you already know how to do. So this is the same thing. Now these first two bits, fine, we've done this before, right? So we're not going to do these two bits because it's the same stuff. This, however, is a bit interesting. F of minus 1 is something called the inverse function. So if you remember when we did trigonometry, when you have sine inverse, it's the inverse function of sine, right? So this is the inverse function. So what can be useful is if this function here, it takes x and squares it, and then subtracts 3. So it's helpful to say, okay, how do I go back and get the original numbers then? Right? So if I'm taking x, squaring and minusing 3, how can I get back to what x was? That's what the inverse function does. Okay? So if a regular function takes inputs and gives you outputs, the inverse function takes outputs and gives you the inputs that you would need to put in. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, I'm sure for some of you, you'll probably be able to do this in your head. Right? For some of you. However, I'm going to show you a method on how to get the inverse function guaranteed. Okay? But again, I do understand that you may be able to do this in your head, but some of them are a bit tricky. So what I'm going to do, to work out the inverse function, this is what you do. You write the normal function, but with y instead of f of x, right? And then the goal is to rearrange for x. So you want to make x the subject. So put x by itself. Okay? So you add 3 to both sides. You get y plus 3 equals x squared. And then you get x equals the square root of y plus 3. Okay. So the inverse function, all you do now is instead of y, you write x, and instead of x, you put f minus 1 of x. This is just a little trick in order to get the inverse function. You rearrange for x, and then that is your inverse function. So it might be weird that I've just like replaced letters willy-nilly. If you like, you can think of this method as just like a way of getting to the inverse function. For inverse, do you need to only change x for y when x appears twice? I don't think I follow. So all you do is you take the original equation, rearrange for x, and then once you're finished rearranging, you replace x with f minus 1x and y with x at the end. If you have two lots of y, then you'd replace them both with x. Yeah. If that's your question. Oh, where the original has two x's? You need to make x equals. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if my original equation had two lots of x in it, I would need to make x equals and then replace all of them with y afterwards. And vice versa, yeah. Perfect. Lila, are you okay with that? We'll do some more practice on it, but... Yes, that will come up, yeah. I believe I have a question like that coming up a bit later, where you can get... So what Mars just suggested with the f(g) of x, that's when you sub in functions as your inputs. So yeah, that can definitely happen, 100%. So it does go up to grade 8 or 9. So yeah, okay, cool. So where it says now, solve f minus 1 of x is 8, all they're saying is that 8 is equal to the square root of x plus 3. And you need to solve the equation. So square both sides, so you get 64 equals x plus 3. Subtract 3 and you get x is equal to 61. Okay. Oh, you like functions, do you, Evie? Nice. You might be one of the only human beings that do. So what your teacher's probably saying is that you're not likely to get it. So I think they're just algebra too. So Ma, what your teacher's basically saying is that they're very unlikely to come up, and he's not wrong. So if you get f(g) of x, that will be one of those like 10% unseen marks that you get, which is basically where they're trying to sift out the grade 9s and 8s. Okay, so the people that are going to get 100% versus people getting 90%, they throw in those really hard questions. We did like the impossible maths question before. Exactly. But they want to try and get to a slightly harder, higher standard this year. So we've been told, which I think is a bit harsh, but whatever. Yeah, no worries. No worries at all. So here, this is, in my opinion, like, it's not grade 9. This is grade 7, 8. So where they ask you to do GF, and they ask you to do f of minus 1, and then when they ask you to solve like this. So this is probably as hard as it's likely to get, but it can get slightly harder as well, okay? So, GF of 3. There are two methods for this. I'm going to show you both, because Ma actually gave an example of f(g) of x. So sometimes they can ask you to sub it in, but I'm going to show you the both ways, okay? So there are two ways to do this. So what does it mean when you have GF of 3? Well, what they're replacing x with, in this case, is f of 3, right? Which means they've just subbed in x is 3 to the f of x equation. So 2 times 3 minus 4, which is 2, right? Then you sub 2 into g. That's what they want you to do. Okay? So they want you to sub f x is 3 into this equation, whatever the answer is, you sub in to x into this equation. That's all that means. Okay? This is something called, if you ever want to look this up, a composite function. Composite because it's made up or composed of two functions. Two or more, I should say, actually, because as Mar pointed out, it can be 3. Is anyone unsure of this so far? Again, if this is brand new to you, this is going to be hard. So I don't blame you for worrying about it. Some other people may have seen this, which is why they're finding it a bit easier. It's completely fine. 11. Okay, so now I'm going to change the question slightly because this is what they could do. They could say, find an expression for g f of x. So you haven't subbed anything in. So what this actually means is you're subbing the whole function f of x as x in this equation. So I'm literally just doing 3 open bracket 2x minus 4 plus 5. So can you see I've taken all of f of x and I've shoved it in x for this equation. So then equals 6x minus 12 plus 5. So 6x minus 7. So then I could do this question where it says, so this is gf of x. So gf, f of 3 is just equal to 6 times 3 minus 7, which as you can see gives you the same answer. So it is a composite function. If they give you what to sub in, it's easier to do it this way. If they ask you to work out the function, then you can just do it this way instead. Okay? But they can ask you just to work out gf of x like this. And that just means you're taking all of f of x and shoving it in for x in the g equation. Whew. That's okay. Okay, so with this bit here, if I just separate that for a second, right? When you have gf of x like this, or in your question where you said ffg of x, what you're doing is you're taking the entire equation f of x, right? So 2x minus 4, and making that x in the g equation. So can you see? Oh God, what happened here? I don't know what else it copied, but yeah. I'm taking the whole equation here and putting it into here. Right? So can you see in that composite function? So I'm going to try this again. Yeah. All I'm doing is taking the whole function of f of x and putting it in place of x here. So instead of x, I'm literally just writing 2x minus 4. Does that bit make sense? And then I expanded and simplified. No worries at all. Again, you guys are doing the right thing. Ask as many questions as possible because, you know, that's kind of the point. Okay, I'm going to delete some of the stuff that I've written because it's a bit distracting. It then says work out an expression for f minus 1 of x. So I'm going to write out f of x again because I've kind of covered it up with my writing. So we want to work out the inverse function. Now again, you can use your logic to find out what it would be. So if the function is 2x minus 4, then you can assume that you're going to add 4 and divide by 2 to get back to the original. But again, let's use well, not but let's use this method. And then rearrange for x. Okay, rearrange for x. Okay, so add 4 to both sides. We get y plus 4 equals 2x. Divide both sides by 2. And we get y plus 4 over 2 equals x. And then all you're doing for your final answer is you write the same thing again, but instead of x, you put f minus 1 of x, and instead of y, you put x. So we have x plus 4 over 2 equals the inverse function. So again, you could have worked this out by yourself or just saying you would add 4 and divide by 2. So if you jump straight to this step, you still get the full marks because you can logically deduce it. there anything they can ask you a proof question? Yes. And those two things are the same, by the way. Right? So if they lie on a straight line, that means they're parallel to each other. But yes, that's the only thing they can ask you off the top of my head, yeah. So they'll say either show that the vectors are parallel or show that A, B, and C, the points A, B, and C lie on a straight line. If A, B, and C lie on a straight line, it means the vector AB and AC are parallel to each other. But yes, that's the only thing they can ask you. Okay. And for the last part, it just says solve... What do you call x in the equation? You can call it... If it's a function, you call it the input. So input. But in general, x can also be called a variable. Yeah. I would always stick with variable though. Because when you guys get up to... I mean, assuming you do anything with maths in the future, you might have a function that actually depends on x and y. In which case you have two inputs, but you can call them variables for short. So I would personally call them variables, but inputs is accepted. That's fine. So yeah, for the last part, solve f of x equals g of x. I'm just going to write f of x again, so that's 2x minus 4. Equals g of x, which is 3x plus 5. Yeah, this, I don't think you guys are going to struggle with this. So minus 2x on both sides. So we have minus 4 equals x plus 5. Minus 5, so you get minus 9 equals x. I don't think the algebra, at least definitely for Evie and Lila, completely fine. Ma, are you okay with like the algebra and rearranging and everything? I assume so. Yeah, cool. Okay, so if you look here, you know, stepping up ever so slightly. Wait, what? Oh. My bad. Oh, okay. I panicked there for a sec. Okay, so again, very similar stuff. So find fg of x means you're just taking g of x and replacing it in this equation. So fg of x is just 3x squared plus 1. So 3x squared plus 1. Okay, so again, all you do is you take the whole of the g function. So if there's extra stuff, I'll take the extra stuff and shove it into where x is in this equation. Or substituting it if you want to use slightly correct terminology. And then gf of x, you're doing the reverse thing. You have x squared. So instead of x squared, I'm putting 3x plus 1 squared. And that's it. You don't have to expand it, but you're more than welcome to. We'll need to expand it for the second part. Is everyone okay with that? Does that sound good? And for the last part, we just need to solve it. So, 3x squared plus 1. If you're finding this too easy, let me know and we can skip to slightly harder stuff, because again, I do have exam questions ready for you guys. Would we all be okay with solving this? Again, it's just a quadratic. Too easy? Okay. Again, we'll run it like a democracy this time. So, Lila, Ma, what do you think? Do you want me to go through this or is this okay? That'd be good, cool. I mean, technically, Ma, you've been outvoted anyway. So, yeah, cool, okay. We'll agree that's good. So, what about this one? Do you think it'd be okay? Do you want any practice finding inverse functions? Again, don't worry about saying no. We can keep going. All good? Okay. No practice. Okay. Ma, Lila, come on. Don't throw your votes away. Try a 3-part function. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So if you guys have your own questions, you can just send them to me. That's completely fine. What about this one? In this one, all you're doing is putting x minus 2 in x. So literally just... Good. Okay. And then if it equals 0, that should be relatively simple to do. For the next part, not for the first part. Do one from hell. I don't know if I have any of the hell ones, to be honest. Okay. Okay, so what we can do then is we'll start doing the exam questions, and then if we find a hellish one, or if I can find a hellish one, or if you guys have a hellish one, we can go through that. And you'll probably make me struggle a bit, which is good. Okay, so first one, work out g f of 1. So again, my recommendation is find out what f of 1 is. This was an an Edexcel question, just so you're aware. But again, you'll find that they all look the same. Completely fine. So 1 squared is 1, times 3 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So then all we're doing is subbing in g of 4, which is 4 over 4 squared. So technically speaking, you can just cancel that and you get a quarter. So yeah, that's fun. So 1 over 4. H is a function such that h is just equal to the inverse function of fg. How do you know g is 4? Okay, good question. So when you have g f of 1, all you want to do is sub in 1 into f. And we got that that was equal to 4. And then all you do is you substitute that into g. Okay. Yeah, because it's composite. Yeah, well put, Evie, as well. Yeah. So again, it's good that you guys ask questions. I like that. So with this one, it's slightly more involved, right? Slightly more. So we have to find the inverse function of fg. So the first step is to find whatever the hell fg of x is. That's what we have to do first. So let's work it out. So if I take g of x and I sub it into this, I'm going to get 3, open bracket, 4 over x squared, squared, plus 1. This could be somewhat interesting, okay. So if I square out those brackets, when you square a fraction, you square the top bit and the bottom bit. So you just get 16 over... I've seen your question. Give me 1 second, Lila. So, what is the purpose of x is greater than 0? That's a good point. So, with these questions, sometimes you do have these little bits here. What this means is that when you solve it, if you solve it, you're going to take the positive answer. So, you know with quadratics, you have 2 answers, right? You probably have 2 different values. Positive and negative, you're just taking the positive one. And for this, x can't equal 0 because obviously 4 divided by 0 would be infinity. It's undefined. It's not even infinity, really. Was that okay? Okay, so that's what fg of x is. Okay, perfect, wonderful. So now what we need to do is work out the inverse function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write y equals 48 over x to the 4 plus 1. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So we get y minus 1 equals 48 over x to the 4. Oh god, I don't know why it's sideways, sorry. Then I'm going to times both sides by x to the 4, briefly. I'm going to divide both sides by the bracket. We get x to the 4 equals 48 over y minus 1. And then you're taking the fourth root of both sides. So x is equal to 48 over y minus 1, 4. Last step, finally, we have h of x. The reason why I'm using h is because in the question it just says it's called h, right? But technically it would be fg minus 1. Either way is completely fine. Yep. What an equation, right? Not bad. Yeah, not too bad. So this was 2 marks, and I believe this was 3 marks, by the way. This bottom one. So you get a mark for working out the composite function fg of x, a mark for then doing the inverse, and then a mark for writing that it's h of x. So in total, 5 marks out of 80, right? Because you have 80 marks in the paper. That's not bad. Okay. This one is a bit cheeky. It's actually just a simultaneous equation in disguise, right? Yes. So the first thing I did was find fg of x, because if you look here, I need to find the inverse of fg of x. But I can't find the inverse of something I don't know is Sorry. I can't find the inverse of a function that I don't know yet, right? So I need to find fg of x first. Then I find the inverse of it. Honestly, you probably did, Evie. In fact, did you ask me how to do it? Because this looks familiar to me as well. But anyways, okay. So, in this expression we have 2 unknowns. We also have 2 equations. So I'm going to write out those equations. So f of 4 equals 7. So how would I write that? I would write 7 equals c 4 plus d. So 7 is equal to 4c plus d. That's my first equation. The next piece of information they give me is that f of 10 is 22. So the way I write that is 22 equals c 10 plus d. So in other words, 22 equals 10c plus d. That's my second equation. Then you're just solving a simultaneous equation. So I would use elimination, just subtract them from each other. I'm going to kind of cheat. I'm going to move this down. And I'm going to subtract them this way. It doesn't matter the order in which you subtract, by the way. It's just that you get nicer numbers, and I'm slightly lazy today. But does that make sense so far? So 22 minus 7 is 15. 10c minus 4c is 6c. So then c is just equal to 15 over 6, which is, you can divide by 3, which is 5 over 2. Yeah. Okay, I panicked for a second there. I thought I made a mistake, but it's all good. And then you can just sub this into whatever equation you want, right? So I'm going to sub it into... So that is a really good question, Mar. You know what? Okay. Old spec, they used to say using substitution. You can use whatever method you like. However, they can possibly give you a quadratic simultaneous equation. You know where you have something like 2y plus x equals 10, and then you have x squared plus y squared equals 3. That probably doesn't work, but whatever, right? Quadratic simultaneous equations can only be solved by substitution. But you can always use whatever method you're fine with. So they don't ask for a specific method. But if they give you a quadratic, it has to be substitution. I know it kind of sucks, but yeah. You're very welcome. Very welcome. And then obviously to work out d, all you're doing is substituting it in. So I'm going to sub it into equation number 1. So we get 7 equals 4 times 5 over 2, because c is now 5 over 2, so I'm not going to write c anymore, plus d. So that gives me, oh god, 7 equals So 5 over 2 is 2.5. So times 4 would just be 10. So then d is equal to minus 3. If you want me to do that in more detail, 4 times 5 over 2, you just multiply the top numbers. So you get 20 over 2, which is of course 10. In case you want me to do that slightly more impressively. So again, for 3 marks, I don't think it's too bad. But it does combine 2 topics, and they love doing that. They love combining multiple topics. Because they are annoying. Part C, sorry, Part B even. AQA tends to have these 1 mark multiple choice questions. Kind of handy, but again, it's good to do. Circle the expression for hg of x. Well, all you're doing for this is you're taking g and putting it in to h, right? So then hg of x would just be 2x minus 1 over 2, which is that expression. Nice and quick. It's just to test your knowledge or understanding of what's going on. Yeah, that's it. Just taking that and just shoving it in. So everywhere you see x, you would put 2x. So one question that, now that I think about it, you may have been asking me all along, is what if there was like 2 lots of x in h of x? You would indeed shove the 2x into every x that you see. So for example, if hx in some weird alternate reality was like x squared plus x minus 1 over 2, then hg of x, you would replace all of the x's with 2x. Okay? So it is all of them, just so you're aware. If. So again, not part of the question. Okay? I think we're all groovy. Okay. The apostrophe. Wait, this bit. The apostrophe. Oh wait, are you talking about like this? Or when you have like G? Is that what you mean? So I'd say, because this is differentiation, that's a A-level topic. In the equation. An apostrophe in the equation. I don't know if I've ever seen that. Yeah, oh, if you ever see like a letter with an apostrophe, it normally means they've done differentiation, which is an A-level topic. So that's probably what you saw. It was like adding fractions to solve a function. Quadratic. So in the UK, because notation changes based on what country you're in as well. So Americans do things slightly differently, and Indians do something else a bit differently. But normally, when you have an apostrophe, it means you've differentiated something. Normally. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if there's any question that you guys will find hard. Great. Hang on. I mean, not really. Basically, when you differentiate a function, it changes what the function is. So it'd be a slightly different function, if that makes sense. Not GCSE maths tutor. Yeah, if you want, you can find it. Yeah, but I don't really want to go through differentiation with you guys. That doesn't seem very hard either. I'm looking online for like the hardest questions. Did one of you say that you had? So Ma, do you have a question in mind? I'm sure I've seen harder math. You know what? Okay, I think I can do something. You can try and type it out. Hang on. There is something I might be able to do. I'm also looking for one. Basically, there was one that I found in like an old spec. Evie, that just sounds like painful. That just sounds like disgusting. That just sounds like torture. Well, you want me to just make up a bunch of different functions and like just sub them all into each other? I mean, we could use this one if you want. Like just do f of g of f of g of x or something stupid like that. Oh god. So if I use these functions, like do you mean something like f of g of f of g of x or something like that? Something really weird like that? Okay. I mean, I can do that if you want, I guess. Okay. I'm just going to check through this one last paper, and if I can't find one, then I'll definitely do what you just said. Ah, I can't find it. It's really annoying. I'm sure they had these. Maybe this is a recent topic. I don't think so, though. Alright, so for this question, Evie's decided to hate me and wants me to do this. Is everyone okay with me doing this? Low-key hoping that you're going to say no? Okay. To be fair, you might not be able to solve this one, by the way, Evie. Just because we're going to get like x to the power of 8. Like we're going to get like an... Okay, fine. Let's do it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to work out what f of minus 1 of x... Oh, wait. Wait, okay, Evie. Truce. Should we do the question that Ma has said? Because this is actually from a GCSE textbook. Like a grade 9 textbook. Okay. Wait, the one that Ma sent or this specific one here? The one that you said. Yeah, okay, let's do that one. Okay, so we have f of x equals x squared plus 4x plus 3, and we have g of x is x plus 2. And what our goal is to find f, g, g of x. So the way I would tackle this problem is I'll take them 2 at a time. Okay? So what you want to do is work out g of g of x and then sub that into f of x. So let's work that out. If I take this whole function and sub it into itself, I'll get something along the lines of x plus 2 plus 2. Okay? Is everyone happy with that? So all I'm doing is I'm taking x plus 2 and replacing x with x plus 2. Perfect. X plus 4 then. And now, since I know what g of x is, to find f g of x, all I'm going to do is take this whole thing and sub it into x in both x's. So we have x plus 4 squared plus 4x plus 4 plus 3. I'm assuming it wants us to simplify, so let's do that. So if I expand x plus 4 squared, I don't know how quickly I should do this. You know what, let's do it nice and slow. So I'm going to expand this bracket, 4x plus 16 plus 3. So then here I get x times x and x is that. So we get x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16 plus 4x plus 16 plus 3. And now what I want to do is gather all the like terms. So x squared, we only have x squared. So that one's done. So I'm going to tick that off. With x's, we have 4x, 4x, and 4x. So that's 4, 8, 12x. So tick those off. For numbers, we have 16 plus 16 plus 3, which is 35. And we can probably factorize this, right? 7 and 5. So it needs to times the 35, add to 12. And that would be 7 and 5. So we get x plus 7, x plus 5. So the answer in the back of the book is either this or this. Just because I didn't know exactly what form they wanted it in. Okay. No worries, no worries. Hopefully it makes sense. So keep in mind, with maths especially, it's better that it makes sense than trying to memorize it.